Welcome to the second episode of Dear Michelle Obama, the podcast, aka Dear Michelle. If you haven't already, please take a listen to Portraits and Recipes. It's the first episode. I am your host, Anonymous. In the last episode, I introduced myself. In this episode, I discuss my earliest definition of normal. There is a steadiness and a stability about Michelle Obama that lets you know that she either experienced normalcy or adopted it. For a time, this was true of my childhood as well. My earliest memory of my childhood isn't a memory at all. It is the recognition of two distinct feelings. The first is that I'm loved. The second is that the love I feel does not come from my mother. She treats me as if she were expecting something else, but must live with the fact that she got me. I'm not coddled or hugged or listened to or cared for. I'm treated as if I'm an obligation, so I'm fed, clothed, and bathed. But I am not loved, at least not by her. My mother is pretty, and not in the way that all kids think their mother is pretty, even if their mother looks like something the cat found in the alley. I mean, she's so pretty that it embarrasses her to tell people that I'm her daughter. When she does, they look at her and then look at me and then look back to her as if they want to tell her that they are sorry that she had to give birth to me. I am unusually thin, and I have thick, nappy, completely uncontrollable hair. I am Crayola crayon brown, and I have large eyes and equally large lips that take up most of my face. I lack the high cheekbones, angled nose, and large forehead of my mother, and I don't know why, but I get the impression that part of the reason she doesn't like me is because I look the way I look, and she was expecting beautiful and got, well, me. She was expecting beautiful because my father is fine. Women stare at him when we walk down the street and murmur lust with the Florida Evans, damn, 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 or like they do when they gawk at Idris or Denzel. He's the color of rosewood and quiet, most of the time anyway. I can't tell if he's quiet because he has nothing to say or quiet because he has a lot to say and is just afraid that it won't come out the way he wants it to. I suspect it's probably the latter. I hear it when he counts. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, he says 1, 2, 3, 4. I've never heard him count beyond 4. I assume he knows that 5 comes next, but maybe he doesn't. He never made it past the 4th grade. They met at a grocery store. My mother, 6'1" and built like a capital letter P, leans over with thick, dark, long hair that cascades past her shoulders to select a can of peas. And my father, 6'3", walks down the aisle not because he's hungry, but because he is thirsty. 3 months later, they marry, but not before a woman drops by and begs my mother not to marry my father. He has a history, the woman warns. The woman calls my father a troubled man, but my mother, stubborn and in love, refuses to listen. They are married by a justice of the peace and move into a 2-bedroom apartment in the suburb that once prohibited blacks to move in. They were one of the first black families to do so. Within 3 years, the entire neighborhood is predominantly black. It is the 60s, and so begins the dance that whites and blacks have been doing for decades. Whites move away, blacks give chase, whites move again, blacks move again. Everyone keeps moving and chasing and moving as if no one realizes we are trapped on a rock spiraling through outer space. But I guess it's easier to move and chase and move than it is to figure out how to get along. Anyway, my parents' plan is to buy a house. My father works 2 jobs. He is an auto mechanic at Sears and Roebuck, and his large, veined hands will work all day and then race home to pick me up and plop me down on his knee. He tells me that I'm his big, pretty baby girl. It's a lie, and I know it, because he's the only one who ever calls me pretty. But I choose to believe him anyway. It is magical when we play hide and seek or when we play my favorite word game. He clears his throat. Baby girl, the letter is L. I giggle. L. Love. L-O-V-E. It is when your mother and father take care of you. Daddy's baby girl is a genius. She's a genius, I say. She is a genius. After the word games end, he twists my nose between his forefinger and index finger until I squeal with delight. Each payday, he'll give me large sums of money. As my mother complains that he has no business doing so, he ignores her. I hide the money beneath my mattress, where I know she'll find it, take it, and never give it back. I could complain. I don't. I'm 6. Our tiny apartment is alive with art and learning. My mother sews. She's taught herself to do so when she was 4 or 5 using a hairpin. By the time she is 18, she is offered a chance to go to New York to sew for one of the big fashion houses with the promise of having her own line someday. But my grandfather, blue, black, and mean, refuses to let her go. She hates her father for that and for the beating she and her siblings experience. One day, a neighbor boy runs away, and my grandfather calls each of his children to his side and beats them in case they even think about running away. Another time, he contemplated chopping a few of my uncle's toes off to keep him from joining the military. It didn't work. One day, my uncle walks over to a recruiting station, raises his hand, and volunteers to go into the military anyway. Somewhere between the beatings and the broken dreams, my mother emerges as the version of normal I will come to know as the woman who raises me. When she isn't sewing, she teaches me to read. By the time I enter preschool, I can read at a first grade level, so I spend much of my time teaching other preschoolers to read. My mother never tells me I'm smart. My daddy, on the other hand, tells everyone who will listen, "That's Daddy's pretty old smart baby girl. One day she's gonna grow up and be a nurse and a lawyer. You just wait and see, 'cause like I said, ain't nobody, and I mean nobody, smarter than my baby girl." My father draws. He draws pictures so realistic that people in our neighborhood pay him to paint portraits of them, to include women. My parents argue about all the nude portraits shoved up underneath the couch they think I don't know about. I don't know it, but 20 years from now, I will walk into a building and stop dead in my tracks. There's an art exhibit on display. Building security asked me if I like art. I tell him I like the artist. So the security guard asks if I've seen the artist's other exhibits. I tell him I have, but that it's been a while. You see, the artist is my father. The guard mumbles, "Oh," and walks away. On Saturdays, we get in my father's Cadillac, the one with the seats he painted with house paint that is now cracking because he didn't like the original color. Anyway, on most days, we drive to the projects where much of my mother's brothers and sisters gathered at my grandmother's house for dinner. Unlike my mother, I know that my grandmother loves me. She gives me a newspaper, silences her large family, and orders me to read aloud. If I mumble, she stops me mid-sentence and tells me that people need to hear my words. And something deep inside me knows she doesn't just mean the people gathered at her kitchen table. My father's mother makes the same request. I am the center of their worlds and I know it. My cousins know it too. We eat the flavors of ice cream I select, and we play the games that I want to play. This is the Black middle class in the 70s. By the time I am 5 years old, everyone I know, love, and see is Black. The mailman, the police officers on foot patrol in our neighborhood, my teachers, the librarian, our landlord, Mr. C, the bus drivers, the store owners, everyone. From the window of our apartment, I watch as Black and brown people shimmy and sway like leaves on trees as they walk down the street. With childlike wonder, I want to know where they go and why they are going there and what their names are. And since I don't know their names, I nickname them. I fall in love with them. I fall in love with all the things I will come to know that they don't always love about themselves. The way their hair defies gravity, the way the sun kisses their skin, the way they laugh, the way they gesture with their hands for emphasis or slap each other high five because they need to touch if only for a moment, the way they say everything with their eyes, even when they don't say a single word. And I am overwhelmed with joy that I get to exist as one of them, the people my mother calls colored people before they become Negro and then Black and then African American. I am proud when I see them. Because when I see them, I see my tribe and I glimpse God. This isn't just normal. This is happy. This is predictable. This is us. And then my mother gives birth to a girl 3 years younger than me. Unfortunately, the baby dies. 2 years later, she gives birth to a boy, my brother, who, unlike me, is the color of white sand with thick, full, loosely curled hair. My mother loves him, and I always assumed that it was in part because she was expecting beautiful, and she got it. And so I pretend not to notice or care that she loves him and spends time with him instead of me. And it isn't just because he is a baby or a baby boy or a light-skinned baby boy. There's a distance between us, my mother and me, but that distance doesn't matter because I am completely content being a daddy's girl. My brother, I assume, is a mama's boy. And this is just the way it is. This is our normal. Looking back, I'm glad I had those years. 6 years of something that looked kind of normal. 6 years when my family hid their insanity. 6 years is long enough to relax in the place where beauty is endless and money is no problem. And there's so much love you don't really care that someone doesn't love you, even if that someone is the person who gave you life. 6 years is long enough to form a reasonable definition of family. Family. So that when insanity finally outruns normal, you have something to compare it to. And metaphorically speaking, you have some place you long to get back to. My father clears his throat. Okay, baby girl, the letter is in. I giggle. In, now. N-O-W. Now is all I have. Now is normal. Because tomorrow will be crazy. Dear Michelle, thank you for 8 years of dignity and grace. Thank you for your family's extraordinary version of normal. Thank you for listening to Dear Michelle, the podcast, aka Dear Michelle. Join me next time when I lay out the 4 definitions of daddy. Email me at dearmichelle@yahoo.com or tweet me at dearmichelle4. Or as my daddy would say, Dear Michelle 4. Bye-bye.